right. Well, Congressman Morgan Griffith, thank you so much for joining me this morning. We are thrilled to have you here. We're going to start with some news of the day, as we always do, because we're Punchbowl News. We are on day 23 of the government shutdown. House Republicans have been out for nearly a month, waiting for the Senate to do its work. How do we get out of this mess?
Well, there are two ways. One, the Democrats can come to their senses and stop holding the American people hostage. And I was telling you in the back room, I'm getting angry. I'm getting angry at this point because next Saturday, SNAP benefits go away. And it's easy for Catherine Clark to say, well, there'll be a little suffering because her district is 29th in household income in her district. Mine is 409th out of 435. So it's easy for her to say there'll be a little suffering. My district's going to face a lot of suffering. And I equate it to Middle Ages siege mentality. You didn't always knock the fort down. You starved the people.
Yeah.
And it's just not right to hold up to try to get benefits for people who have more money. They're not rich, but they have more money to make the people in my district go hungry. It's just not right. So the anger levels are rising. Hopefully they'll come to their senses next week. There is another way, and this is Senate Republicans. Since 2012, I have publicly ridiculed and railed against 2012, if I said 22, it's 2012. I have railed against the modern cloture filibuster rule. The second generation, first generation didn't even think of it. The second generation thought of having a supermajority.
Yep.
It was Calhoun's tyranny of the majority. He wanted to have the minority to be able to block things in the Senate. And it wasn't until the 1970s that we adopted it, and they didn't start abusing it until both sides, until the 1990s. You eliminate that rule. I know there'll be lots of
You're
bad
ready to
bills
get rid
passed.
of the filibuster. That's where you're at.
Well, I've always been there. Because to me, it is anathema to a republic based on democratic principles, which means the majority runs the place. And if we had the majority running the place, my constituents wouldn't have to be worried about going hungry next week or 2 weeks from now, because it's a real concern when you're 409 out of 435. I have a lot of people who depend on SNAP benefits, not just a few. My churches will do what they can, but I have a significant portion of my population, not just a small remnant group like Clark has in her district. And it's just not right. It's unfair. It's not the way our system was set up. And the Democrats really ought to come to their senses, but the Senate Republicans could fix it.
You are a member of the House Rules Committee. It looks pretty much like we're going to be heading to another CR, right? Will you vote for a CR to get on the House floor?
Yes. I mean, I will. I don't like them.
Right.
But, you know, this is inappropriate, what we're going through right now. And the Senate Democrats picked this fight, but they've not offered any real, they've put nothing on the table that would give us even a place to start negotiations with. And I'm not saying we should. I'm just saying you can't even say they're being realistic. They are not at this point. And it's Senate Democrats. But I really don't understand why my colleagues on the Democrat side, both in the House and the Senate, don't understand that when you start taking away SNAP benefits, it's not uncomfortable. You can't, you know, the pay is uncomfortable and it's unfortunate for certain federal employees, but we always backfill. You can't backfill that you're hungry. You can't backfill and say, well, I'm going to undo that you were hungry last week. That can't be undone.
Right. I want to shift gears, and then we're going to get quickly to the topic of the day, but I do want to talk about Virginia politics.
Okay.
The governor's race, just a few weeks away.
We can talk about the Attorney General, too.
All right, well, polls have consistently shown that Abigail Spanberger is in the lead. The contestant is seen as an early test, certainly for Democrats, about the 2026 midterms, the policies that they're pushing. What do you read into whether she wins or not? Do you think she is going to win?
Winsome or Abigail?
Well, you tell me.
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't think you can believe the polls. You have to look at all kinds of other data. And unfortunately, people both in my district and in the inner cities don't trust pollsters, so they won't answer the questions or they answer them falsely. So we don't really know. And I just remind people all the time that in 2010, when I was first elected, I was behind 18 points on October 1st and won on Election Day by 4.8.
So you have some history there.
I got a little history. So I will tell you, I don't know who's going to win. I don't think it says anything about national politics unless Spanberger wins by 20 or unless Winsome wins by more than 5. I think otherwise it's just Virginia doing what Virginia does, and it leans to the Democrats. So that's why I made the number much higher for it to mean anything. If Abigail Spanberger wins by 20, then you're getting some data that you might be able to use. Otherwise, it's just noise in the political world, and Virginia's doing what Virginia does.
All right, let's shift to the topic of the day, cancer prevention and early detection. First things first, you are new to the role on Energy and Commerce Committee, Health Subcommittee Chair. Talk to us a little bit about your focus and goals and how you plan to use the purge.
Well, I want to get all kinds of things done, and I commend the chairman and his team. We've talked about it. If there's bipartisan agreement, yes, it's got to go to the full committee for a vote, but if they want to bypass the Health Subcommittee, it's fine with me. And the reason I say that is that I could have that post for 6 years. I could double the number of hearings that you normally have, and I still wouldn't get more than 20% done of what I would like to get done. I want to see us get all kinds of things done. We're on the precipice of a huge revolution in medicine. AI is going to do some amazing things, and that's going to do some scary things too, and we have to be careful because you can create all kinds of new pathogens by accident. So we have to be careful, but with AI, we're going to have the ability to do all kinds of things and shortcut and make it faster, and we have to have an FDA that's nimble enough to react to that and not have an AI telling us, here's an answer for a rare disease, or here's a new answer for a disease that's common. And, let's not take, 10 years to get it from start to finish when we know, based on computer modeling and other, that we can do it a lot faster. The FDA has to be more nimble. I'm ready to help in any way I can to make them more nimble out of the committee. But when you're looking at all the things that we can be doing, I will never get everything done that I want to get done. And so my goal is to get as much done as I can.
All right, well, we are here talking preventative care for things like cancer screenings. When you go back to Southwest Virginia, what do you hear from your constituents about this? Are they getting the screenings? Do they know they need to get the screenings? Are doctors doing enough to make sure that people are doing that preventative care?
Well, when it comes to the things that most people are familiar with, yes. But when you talk about some of the cutting-edge technologies, the newer possibilities with cancer screenings and so forth, no, they're not discussing it. Now, that's our job to get this thing done and to make sure that we get it out there, and people need to be educated on this. And it was a part of what came out in our hearing on the new cancer screening techniques, because there's a lot of high positives and some false positives and some false negatives. So people need to understand it's not an automatic, oh my gosh, I took the test, I have cancer. It is something triggered, let's go take a deeper look. People need to be ready for that. On the false negatives, which are lower than the false positives, people need to understand that, and I always use bladder cancer as one of those, is because the only way to tell is if you suddenly have blood in the urine. Well, if you get a negative in June and suddenly have blood in the urine in October, you still have to pay attention. You can't say, oh, I got a negative result, I don't need to worry about it. No. Use your common sense and be prepared, and it will cost a little bit of money. You're going to have some more tests. You may even have to have a biopsy that may turn out to be negative, but you want to follow that path, because here's what happens. If you get a positive for something bad like pancreatic cancer, and we all know somebody who's gotten it and was stage 4 before they ever started feeling bad, right. You want to follow that down, because if you can catch that in stage 1 or stage 2, it's not a death sentence anymore. But we don't have it, and people have to understand, and people includes the FDA and CMS, is that yes, you're going to spend some money on those tests, but the amount of money you save on the back end is going to offset it. I don't know that we make money by doing it, but we certainly offset it substantially when you have somebody who is caught, whose cancer is caught early. Yep. And then we don't pay for all of that expensive end-of-life treatment, because we cure them, or at least give them a treatment that gives them a life expectancy equal to what they had anticipated before they got the diagnosis.
Let's double click on some of the legislation that you're involved in. You, as are on the ENC, are the Republican lead on the Lung Cancer Screening and Prevention Act. Talk a little bit about what is that, why is it needed, and what's its prospects?
Well, and this is another one of those new tests, and what this bill does is it cuts out some of the red tape in the middle. I mean, that's basically what it does to shorten the testing process. Mm-hmm. We don't want something out there that doesn't work, but we feel pretty good that it's probably going to work. So let's shorten that timeline up and then let the FDA get in there, and if it doesn't work, come back and tell us. But one of the things that I've dealt with since I first came on to Energy and Commerce a long time ago, 15 years ago, is that sometimes they're so cautious at the FDA that when there is nothing out there that can do early testing, and I can remember a hearing with what we now consider fairly regular, the diabetes monitors, FDA was very concerned because there might be a false reading or it might not trigger when you were actually having a problem. But there was nothing else on the market at the time that gave you any kind of an adequacy. Now, by usage, and this is one of the things why you want to get these things out there, by usage and additional development, the more people are using it, the more you can improve it, and the cheaper it becomes. And so this is one of the things we think if we can take out, it's about a 7-year timeline from what my team tells me, that if we remove some of this red tape, you're not getting rid of the safety valves, so that you're not hurting anybody, but you're getting rid of some of that red tape that can get these products to the market quicker.
You also are a co-sponsor of the Nancy Gardner Sewell Medicare Multi-Cancer Early Detection Screening Coverage Act. Tell us about that and kind of where things stand.
Well, and that's the one I was talking about a little bit earlier, where we were talking about the cancer screening. And yeah, I mean, is it perfect? No. It's fairly rudimentary in what I envision where we'll be in 10 years. But if you're the person with bladder cancer or pancreatic cancer, getting an early warning so you can treat it before it is metastasized or become fatal to you at a point where it can't be treated is so important that I want to see us move forward. Now, that said, the critics have a legitimate point. I don't want people to think the critics are just wrong and they're wet blankets. No. The consumer has to understand that if you get a false positive, don't panic and think, oh my gosh, my life is over, I got a positive for cancer. There are going to be a lot of false positives, and it breaks it into categories, and then you have to go check on these 5 cancers, and maybe you hit 2 of the triggers and you have to go check on 10 cancers. Yeah. So people need to understand it's a longer process. It's not a I'm clean, I'm not clean kind of situation. But if the consumer understands that, if the medical providers are telling them and making sure they understand it before they use the test, then I think it's a great concept. And the more people who use it, the better it'll get, the more data we'll have, and the cheaper the cost will become. Because right now it's about $1,000 if you were to do it, and that's do one of those tests, and that's prohibitive for most of the people in my district.
Sure. Yeah.
Now, if CMS is paying for it, that helps, even if there's a copay. But it'll become cheaper over time. And when we discover those cancers and we save those lives, people are going to go, yeah, that was a really good idea. But got to go forward as a consumer and as medical providers with caution, because it's not perfect. It's not going to give you, it's not, Dr. McCoy on Star Trek doing the scanner and going, oh, let's go treat this. It's a little bit more complicated.
If things were that easy in so many ways. I want to kind of talk about that, though, because so much of this stuff isn't partisan, right? It's not Republicans are for it or Democrats. I mean, I think, cancer screening, prevention, early detection are things that every person in this room has probably been touched by cancer in their family, personally, knowing people. Why is it so hard to get these bills done?
I think it's easier in energy and commerce because we immerse ourselves in these issues, and I don't know where Diana DeGette stands on this particular bill, but she's a true leader. She's a friend. I mean, we might have our disagreements from time to time, but at the end of the day, she's a friend and she's a true leader on trying to make bipartisan cures. I mean, she with Fred Upton did the cures bill originally. You're going to hear from her later. That's why I bring her up in particular. There are others. But then you get the institutional at the administrative level, and that's not a criticism on any administration. It cuts across all parties. You get this resistance. You also get resistance from people who haven't immersed themselves in it. So they hear something in Ways and Means Committee, or they hear something in another committee or somebody who's just getting it on the floor for the first time and they go, oh, this sounds crazy. Oh, these false positives are really high. All of my constituents are going to think they have cancer. And those are legitimate concerns, but it's not a reason to stop the progress of the bills and the progress of these technologies. But we do have to make sure that folks are educated so they don't have a panic attack when they get it. But we've had years to study it on the committee, and on the health sub in particular. It takes a while for other people to become comfortable with it, and so that's why you have such a hard time getting these things passed.
Makes a lot of sense. I want to look ahead. There was a failed bipartisan effort on healthcare last year that included everything from PBM reforms to telehealth flexibilities. It also included several provisions focused on increasing patient access to cancer screenings. That, of course, failed. It seemed like it had all the momentum in the world, but it ended up failing. Many lawmakers have said they support moving something this year, before the end of the year. Do you support that? Where does that effort stand?
Well, right now it's in shutdown. I mean, yes, I support that. We've already gotten a couple of them out. My Halt Fentanyl Act has crossed the finish line. A couple of others, Support Act, and some of the others are in the process and moving forward, or were. And I do support that, and I think the real problem at the end of the year was there were people who did not understand, and it's a problem with Congress. We throw all this stuff into one big bill, and I never call anything big beautiful, just saying. Because when it's big, you can't figure it all out fast, and when you have new folks coming in who aren't familiar with those concepts, as we were just talking, and they see a bill that's got 1,000 pages that they don't understand, instead of breaking it down into 5 pages here and 35 pages there and 100 pages here, they just see it as, oh my gosh, there's got to be something bad in here. And most of the time they would be right. In this case, they were wrong. I think we can get a lot of that across the finish line if we come back to work. But we got to come back to work.
So optimistic, though, that there could be time in the calendar because, I mean, as you know, there's not a lot of legislative days, certainly, before the holidays.
If it's not something that we have to get done before the end of the year, from a health committee standpoint, I've been telling people, regrettably, you're looking at winter, spring. If it's got to be done by the end of the year, our extenders, and many of which, a fair number of which were actually in the CR that were bipartisan, and you haven't heard anybody on the other side complaining about those because they were, federally qualified health centers, telehealth, I mean, stuff that we all agree on. But I think we can get those things done, but this was our month to have the hearings to line up anything extra. So if it's not something that has to be done by the end of the year to extend authorization, to take care of our dish hospitals, to, look out for some of these programs, it's not going to get done until winter, spring. And I'm advocating for night hearings so we can get more done, but that's a lot.
I'm not. As someone who gets up very early, no night hearings.
It's not easy to get done, but we're so far behind. And as I said before, I could do this for 6 years and not get everything done I want to get done. So I'd be happy to work extra hours.
I appreciate that. I want to talk, you've talked about the FDA quite a bit and kind of some of the stumblings and kind of the push-pull that happens with Congress, with administrations, both Republicans and Democrats. Next year's a big year for the FDA and negotiating the terms of its 2027 user fees reauthorization package. Your subcommittee will oversee this. Have you started to focus on what you want as part of that package? Kind of outline a little bit for us, maybe some of the highlights or things that we should be focused on.
Well, I think that we'll have bipartisan agreement on getting the user fees done. They've been very successful. We have to make sure that we don't overdo it because you make the user fees too high, you put us at a disadvantage in competition with other nations on doing the breakthrough technologies. So we've got to make sure we do it reasonable and work with the industry and figure out what we can do that's reasonable. I can't tell you that I have a specific goal in there, except that we want to keep those programs going because coming up with new treatments is extremely important. And you don't, sitting there listening at home or here in the audience, you don't always think about how it's going to impact you until it does. So I'm on Xarelto. As a result of COVID, it triggered a genetic disorder that causes me to have blood clots. My district is huge. It's bigger than 9 states by landmass, and I'm driving all over the place. This week, I think I'm doing between 1,600 and 2,000 miles in the car. Could not do that under the old medications, but about 20 years ago, they came out with some new stuff. So about 15 years before I needed it, our researchers came up with new medicines, Eliquis and Xarelto, that make it so that I don't have a problem. I can continue to do my job. Think of the thousands of other conditions that people have out there that we don't know today, some small companies working on, some big companies working on, that will solve it and make it so that people can continue to do the job they love doing. I love doing my job. Other people love doing their jobs. And that's why we want to have the United States be the leaders in innovation and technology. So we want to get it right. And I'm happy to work with all the various people involved in the process, all the stakeholders, as we say, to make sure that we get it right and move forward in a positive way so America can continue to lead on innovation in the healthcare arena.
We are almost out of time, but before I let you go, I do want to ask, you talked about AI, you talked about innovation. I mean, so much of this is pretty amazing, right? Astounding. You talk about 20 years ago, the treatment you had didn't exist. Tell us, like, project forward 5 years from now. What's your goal for what Congress can do when it comes to cancer prevention in the next 5 years, screenings? Are there things on the horizon that you think can really change lives?
Well, you know, we're doing it here today. I don't know how many people are watching, but they've heard us talk about the cancer screening possibilities. They've heard us talk about the false positives and the false negatives and how you deal with that. It's about getting the message out and talking about it. The technology is moving fast, and so we have to constantly be talking to the public. I talk about it when I go out. It's not the hot topic today, but it's topics that, you know, I get into with healthcare providers and things like that as we go out and we educate the community so that they can see what's coming and be ready for it. And also when something new comes along, to not be afraid of it, to embrace it and to recognize that it may not be perfect, but as long as it doesn't do any significant side effect or harm, we should try to embrace some of these new things a little bit quicker.
All right, we're going to leave it there. Congressman Griffith, thank you so much for your time this morning.
I've
We really
enjoyed it.
appreciate it. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Thank you. All right, bye-bye. All right, thank you so much to Congressman Griffith. What a great conversation to kick off this morning's programming. Now I'd like to welcome Congresswoman Diane DeGette, the Democrat from Colorado, to the stage for our conversation. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having me.
All right, let's get started here. We always start with a few news of the day questions since we're Punch Bowl News.
There's lots every day now.
There is. We are on day 23 of the government shutdown. Democrats have said they won't reopen the government until there's a deal on Obamacare subsidies. Republicans so far aren't budging on that. What is going to get us out of this mess?
Well, the first thing to know, the Republicans control all the levers of power, the House, the Senate, and the White House. And so they're the ones that could open the government. The reason we're so concerned about these ACA premium supports is because the Democrat or the Republican leadership, Speaker Johnson and Leader Thune, have given no indication that they intend to do anything about this. And between the Medicaid cuts and these cuts, about 15 million people are going to lose their insurance. Also, as I learned from my Colorado insurance commissioner the other day, it puts upward pressure on everybody's insurance rates. In Colorado, insurance may go up for everybody around 30% next year. And so the reason why we have to put this pressure on is because if it doesn't happen, millions of people are going to lose their insurance, and everybody else's insurance is going to become unaffordable. I don't know what the Republican leadership thinks is going to happen. Do they think this is not real? And you know, the other day, I heard Speaker Johnson say, I have hundreds of ideas about what to do about health care. That's a quote. And I said, I wish he would share just one of them with me. Because I've been in Congress, I was the chief whip and vice chairman of the Energy and Commerce Committee when we did the Affordable Care Act. And all the times after that, the Republicans kept saying, we're going to repeal and replace, repeal and replace. They never came up with a plan to replace. All of us agree that health care is too expensive right now in this country. And Congressman Griffith, he's a really dear friend of mine. We worked on the oversight subcommittee together, and we're both former trial lawyers, so we have a great relationship. But you know, his constituents are paying are going to be paying a lot more, and they need to come to terms with the fact that healthcare is going up, and we need to work together.
Well, let's talk about that because he spoke a little bit about SNAP benefits, right? A lot of states are running out of money when it comes to SNAP benefits. Federal workers missing another paycheck. I mean, this is becoming real. Oftentimes, historically, Republicans have been the ones to shut down the government, and they have not gotten anything when they've reopened it.
So, okay, go ahead.
So no, I mean, how concerned are you that Coloradans are going to say, like, okay, yes, we definitely have health care and issues, and November 1st, the rates we're going to get notices, but we're hungry. I mean, you can't go back on that.
Well, let's talk about the SNAP benefits, because in their, what I call HR1, their big bad bill, that's what I call it, they cut SNAP benefits. That's a bill that
They reduced them, yep.
No, well, they cut them. 23 million Americans are going to lose or get their SNAP benefits cut because of that bill that my dear friend Morgan voted for. So I think it's a little ironic right now that they're trying to make the argument, oh, we need to open the government to give people SNAP benefits. And I mean, I'm from Denver, Colorado. I have a standing date over at the food bank. It's a crisis proportion everywhere. But the Republicans could work with us to restore those SNAP benefits and to help us with the Affordable Care Act credits. But also, by the way, I think we do need to talk in a bigger role, with this may be a conversation for another day, about how we make health care more affordable in this country.
No, I understand. I want to ask one other question, then we are going to shift to the topic of the day, cancer prevention and early detection. But there's been some criticism of how your leadership has talked, kind of the messaging, right? Chuck Schumer told us on our show that, every day gets better for us when it comes to the shutdown. Catherine Clark, your colleague, recently ended up in some hot water over some comments she said. Do you think the messaging that Democrats has is working?
Well, I think if you look at public opinion, the messaging is totally working, because before this happened, nobody was really focused on the fact that healthcare premiums were about to skyrocket. I remember in August, I had a press conference over at a hospital in my district saying that the healthcare is about to skyrocket and these premium supports are going to expire at the end of the year. Nobody was focused on it. Now, if you look at any media outlet, newspaper, online, every place, everybody is keenly focused on the fact that that insurance premiums are about to increase and that Congress needs to do something about it.
All right, let's shift to the topic of the day. This is your first term as the Democratic lead on the Energy and Commerce Health Subcommittee. Talk to us a little bit about what policy you're focused on. What are you looking to how put your stamp on the subcommittee?
Well, even though it's only my first term as the ranking member, I've worked on health care as a priority of mine for most of my time in Congress. I have a lot of pieces of legislation that I'm working on that I would like to see passed. Most people know that I was the co-sponsor, along with former Congressman Fred Upton, of the 21st Century Cures Act, which modernized and updated the way we do research at the NIH and then device and drug approval at the FDA. And so I was working in the last Congress with Congressman Larry Bouchon on Cures 2.1 to help modernize and update that even more. And I have several Republicans who want to be my lead in this Congress, and we have it all ready to go. Of course, the problem is even before this shutdown, the priority of the Republican leadership in Congress, I don't blame Morgan for this, but the priority of the Republican leadership in Congress has not been to pass legislation except for HR1. And so, for example, in the Health Subcommittee, I think Morgan talked about this a minute ago, we've only had 9 hearings or markups. So all this great legislation that I have, that he has, and much of this legislation is bipartisan, we can't even get a hearing on it. And then add to that, cast your mind back to last December when we had the omnibus bill we were going to pass. And Elon Musk sent out a tweet saying to take all of the extenders out. Well, that was 34 things that were agreed upon in a bipartisan way, including the special diabetes program and everything else. But as I was watching, I made a note because one of the bills that was stripped out last December, talking about cancer detection, was this Nancy Gardner-Sewell Medical Multi-Cancer Early Detection and Screening Act. That could be law right now. And so I keep asking Chairman Guthrie and Chairman Griffith every time we have one of our 9 hearings or markups, when are we going to do the bipartisan agreed upon health extenders from last year? They don't have an answer.
Yeah, I mean, we talked to the congressman about that, and he was saying, I mean, it is one of those things that it felt like it had momentum, and then all of a sudden was stalled last year. So you're not optimistic that that gets passed before the end of the year? You think it goes into next year?
It was not stalled. It didn't have momentum, and then it was stalled. It was cut from a text by Elon Musk. So let's call it like it is. And so now it should be bipartisan. I told Chairman Guthrie that we could pass those health extenders on the suspension calendar, if of course we were in session, and it would pass on a overwhelmingly bipartisan basis. So it's really not like hung up. I don't understand what the problem is.
All right, I want to talk about going back to Colorado, cancer prevention, screening, early detection. What are you hearing from your constituents? Are they educated? Is there partnerships that need to be happening to make sure that this is happening, or any concerns you have when you're talking to Coloradans?
Well, so it would help if we would pass the enabling legislation, but also if you're worried about early detection of cancer, which we should be, because of course, cancer rates have decreased, I think 34% in recent years, and so that's amazing. If we're going to get it down even lower, we have to both have the research to have the cures, but also the early detection. If you keep people out of insurance, like if you take away their Medicaid coverage, or if they can't afford to buy into the exchanges and they lose their insurance, that's the number one group I worry about not doing early detection. Because if you have insurance and you feel a little lump in your breast, you're going to go right over there to the doctor. If you don't have insurance, you're going to have to pay for that detection, maybe even an MRI, tens of thousands of dollars with your own money, and these are people who can't even afford to buy insurance.
You were one of the lead sponsors of the Preventative Health Savings Act. What does the bill do, and why is it significant when it comes to things like cancer screening?
So I love this bill because I thought this bill up myself, along with former Congressman Mike Burgess. And I call it the prevention dividend. What this bill said, so we came up with it during the Affordable Care Act, when we were told by the Congressional Budget Office we couldn't include smoking cessation programs in the ACA because of the cost. I thought that's the craziest thing I ever heard. You won't pay for the patch or whatever, but you're going to pay for the lung cancer treatment and the heart disease and all that. So Mike and I came up with this bill, and what it says is we're going to put more of an effort on scoring for prevention rather than treatment. And this bill languished for like 15 years until last session of Congress. We were able to pass it through the committee and then through the House, and then it got hung up in the Senate. So we're doing it again this year, and we have high hopes that we can actually pass it if we ever go back into session.
So talk about that, because I think we're talking about this, and I was thinking about this preparing for this conversation. I mean, cancer detection, early treatments, things like that. It seems to me everybody in this room has been touched by cancer in some shape or form. It's not partisan. Why on this thing, why is it still so hard to get things done?
It's Congress.
Congress is congressing? Oh man.
I mean, I don't, I've been there a long time, and I don't know why you couldn't pass this bill the first moment it was introduced. Some people have a absolute opposition to what they consider to be dynamic scoring. Although I think in the issue of disease prevention, and what that would be is, like in disease prevention, you can't just say there's a 10-year limit, because of course, if you're a smoker, that's a perfect example. If you're a smoker, you're not going to develop the lung cancer till many, many years later. That's why it works in this situation, and I think there's been some of that. Senator Grassley was the one that blocked it the last time, and I don't really know what his objection was, but we're going to find out. And we have a good bipartisan group in the Senate who's helping us too.
We were talking a little bit about the FDA, and so some of these bills, kind of the challenges where the FDA might take a little bit longer because there's concerns. How have you felt like working with the FDA? Do you feel like there's some challenges there when you're kind of pushing some of these early detection bills?
I think that over the last number of years, under both Democratic and Republican administrations, there have been really excellent FDA directors that have been really focused on modernizing and updating the FDA. I am concerned with this administration that most of those career scientists who know what they're talking about have been replaced with political appointees. And a lot of the philosophy over at HHS these days is not based on science, but based on politics. I was just meeting with some of the former FDA officials the other day, and they're very concerned that the FDA might start making some of these decisions based on politics and opinions, not science. And I think that's a very, very bad idea.
The FDA will begin negotiating the terms of its 2027 fees reauthorization package next year. Your subcommittee has jurisdiction, and we'll vote on it. Where are you focused when it comes to this package? Are there FDA-related policies that should be included in that legislation?
Well, I think that traditionally, the user fee reauthorization has been a good conduit for a lot of policy changes, and I think there are. I look forward to working with Chairman Griffith and also the full committee, to Chairman Guthrie and others, because I do think some of these bipartisan issues can be included.
You've also been focused on the VALID Act. Can you talk to us a little bit about that, why it's important, and what's the pathway to that legislation?
So the VALID Act is another bill I developed. I developed this bill in conjunction with the FDA, with Rob Califf and also with Congressman Bouchon. And I have new leadership working on the VALID Act with me now. The VALID Act, what it does is it helps us regulate lab-based testing. And most people don't realize that we don't already regulate lab-based testing, but with the explosion of these unregulated labs, the concern, of course, is that you're going to have inaccurate results, and people are going to make medical decisions on this. And so this is also something that has good bipartisan support, and that if we ever get going in the Health Subcommittee, I would hope that that would be a top priority.
All right, Representative DeGette, we are quickly running out of time, but I want to project 5 years forward. What do you hope Congress will have gotten done and across the finish line when it comes to cancer prevention and access to preventative treatments?
Well, I would hope that we would pass laws that would allow us to continue this real cutting-edge research that we've been doing at the NIH on so many of these treatments and preventions. I would hope that we would work on figuring out how we're going to fund the treatment, because some of these treatments, they may cure or prevent cancer, but they're very expensive. We have to make them accessible to everybody. The people in rural Virginia and the people in urban Denver, Colorado. And then also we have to make sure that we modernize and streamline the way that we can review and approve drugs and treatments at the FDA, and then at CMS, how we can provide them.
One last question, AI, innovation, I mean, it's a bright spot that a lot of people look to when it comes to things like cancer prevention. Is that something you've been focusing on?
So the Energy and Commerce Committee in general has had a good focus on AI, and we have a lot of bipartisan interest on our committee. I do think that these techniques can be used as a tool for good, to aggregate data, to help us find, small parts that we need to focus on. But as the doctors will remind you, it's not a substitute for medical decision-making.
Yeah, no, makes sense. All right, Representative DeGette, we're going to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. I really appreciate it.
You.
Thank you. Really, really great. Leave it there. Perfect. All right, well, we have had two great conversations, and I'm excited to end this morning's programming by welcoming up, we have Mohit Manro, Senior Vice President and Head of U.S. Oncology for AstraZeneca. He also heads up the company's foundation for a fireside chat. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. All right, well, those are some tough acts to follow, but we have a lot to talk about here. So first things first, tell us a little bit about kind of your role at AstraZeneca and how the company's kind of perspective on prevention, access to care, to ground this conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Anna. Thanks for having me. And I think it was two great conversations. I'd like to build from there. At AstraZeneca, we firmly believe we can all work together towards one day eliminating cancer as a cause of death. And the entire ecosystem has a role to play. We as a biopharma who's innovating at the cutting edge of bringing new science really is driving from that perspective, but also there is opportunity in driving early detection and prevention and ensuring the society understands the role of risk factors, understanding their own risk factors, taking care of own screenings, and of course the broader ecosystem in ensuring the path to doing prevention to all the way to curative treatments is clear. So we all have a role to play, but I think at AstraZeneca we are dead focused on eliminating cancer as a cause of death.
Yeah, so when you, I mean, that's obviously an ambitious and important goal. Talk about early detection, right? Like we heard from the congressman a little bit about some of the challenges that happen, right? Whether it's, societally or getting kind of public-private partnerships. Why is that important and what needs to happen there?
Yeah, so if we just look at, on one side, this year and since last year, 2 million plus Americans would be diagnosed with cancer annually, which means around 5,500 Americans every day are being diagnosed. On the other side, we also have around 1,700 deaths a day because of cancer. So it may look like, oh my God, this is a huge problem ahead of us, and there's more and more mortality that's happening because of this, which is true. But at the same time, on the other side, the advancements in data science, technology, and innovation that's happening, it's bringing a lot of hope. And prevention and understanding of risk factors, screening, and really taking charge of detecting your cancer early has a huge role to play. We just coming back from a big oncology conference where data was presented, again showing that bringing treatments, innovative treatments to early setting, when the cancer is less aggressive and less intervention is required, people can get actually cured and get back to their normal lives is huge. It's huge not only for the individual to have a quality of life and back to doing things that they do, like Representative Griffith was talking about his own experience, not on cancer, but on the other side, but also that this is something which is much more broadly applicable as it relates to bringing things that already exist. There's a fair amount of understanding of certain risk factors. We all can do a role collaborating with the society and ecosystem to educate people on that. Secondly, there are screenings available. We all can hold hands to kind of drive towards uptake of those screenings so that we can actually drive early prevention as well as detection that can save lives. I always say it out, and I'll use this forum again to say today cancer is screenable, detectable, and treatable. And I think given this is October Breast Cancer Awareness, what you were talking about news, we should create that news out there that, get out there and talk to your sister, mother, wife, daughter, who could be eligible for breast cancer screening, who should act on it because it can absolutely save lives.
So when you look across the screenings, obviously there's a lot of different kinds of cancers. Where are the most significant gaps that still exist that need to be closed?
Yeah, Anna, we had a survey done a year back with around 4,600 Americans, and what we found was majority of them were not aware of the screening guidelines by USPSTF on which cancers are screenable, what's the criteria, etc. And amongst those who are also aware, about 2/3 were not up to speed with their screenings, which means there's a lack of awareness as it holds to what's screenable. And you look at the report from American Cancer Society, there's increase in cancer incidence among many cancer types. 6 out of them are screenable. So there's an opportunity to really engage society. And one of the things I truly think is forums like this play a role, but also broader society and partnerships. For example, we partnered with Hockey Fights Cancer. So we get out in the arenas with NHL and then really engage the audience there on what's screenable today, what are the risk factors, take your control of your health, go talk to your physician, understand better and act on this. So I think that's a huge opportunity there.
Yeah, that's really interesting, not just kind of the doctor-patient setting, not just maybe forums where you would expect it, but kind of meeting people where they're at,
Yes.
where they're open to seeing something new for the first time.
Yeah, cancer is a scary word. I'm sure none of us discuss that at our dinner table with the families, but we got to change that. I mean, just go back 20, 25, 30 years. Hypertension and heart attack led to so many deaths and nobody talked about it. Today, just with keeping our regular physicals and regular health checks, we can get ahead on our diabetes and hypertension and other things. And it's not a scary word that we don't talk and discuss. We talk about eating habits that lead to high cholesterol, etc. We got to change the narrative out there in society where cancer is no longer a scary word, where we can rather understand our risks and act together as a society on it.
So what would meaningful progress look like 5, 10 years from now?
It is exciting, and every day when me, my teams, and everybody in this ecosystem get out of bed, there is so much hope. I'll give an example. We just recently published a paper, a tool called Milton in Nature Genetics. It looked at 500,000 healthy volunteers, regular diagnostic tests that were done at their, healthcare professionals in a regular approach. And it was able to detect up to 1,000 diseases 10 years in advance of they showing up in clinic. That's the promise that holds out today, that actually data, AI, and science coming together can help us understand much more on the biology of the disease, but also being able to predict who could be at risk, so that then we can make interventions like what needs to happen to prevent it, or when to intervene when it's starting to come to a point where this. So I think the future in the next 5 to 10 years is hopefully all of us at our regular physical can get a 10 mil blood draw, know our risk factors, get ahead on dealing with them, whether in a preventive way or avoiding those risks, or when needed, actually the policy and the ecosystem and the incentive support for us to be screened, treated in the most appropriate way.
So AstraZeneca is focused on innovation. We talked to both the members of Congress about AI, technology. I think both were very optimistic that this is one of those areas where they feel like there's a lot that can be done. What do you see as the most significant innovations that can change the landscape for early detection?
Yeah, so just example, the tool I gave about like Milton, those kind of innovations. If we look at some of the multi-cancer, blood-based tests that both representatives were talking about, they're coming through is really looking at a lot of data sets, and with what naked eye and existing biomarkers cannot do, but really AI can help us understand patterns to then come to what could be potentially a risk factor or a biomarker for cancer's early presence. Like, that's the ability of AI to unlock that possibility. Not only there, to actually intervene and design test, in our innovation and treatment design, we are using AI all the way from understanding the biology of the disease, but also designing medicines that would actually target that driver of the disease and spare the rest, so reducing the side effects, but also then able to understand for how long that treatment needs to be so that it can stop and people can actually live a treatment-free life. So AI has applicability across, and I think it's also important to say in the same breath that while we go on that journey, we also need to understand that there will be guardrails that we need to put around so that we are absolutely making the most of it. One most important one on that is it needs to be inclusive from day one. It needs to be, the health equity needs to be a part of it. It cannot be just based on a sample of a certain population. We need to be inclusive from day one so that when we see on the other side it's predicting and helping us treat every individual in every zip code.
Let's look forward. What would you like to see happen in the next 5 years when it comes to early cancer detection and cancer care?
Yeah, I think there is a lot of technology that's available today, but on the other side, the uptake is still there are multiple gaps. So I think what I'd like to see happen in the next 5 years is first at a very, very societal level. Cancer is no longer a scary word. We can have a dinner conversation with our families. We can talk about our risk factors. We have an understanding at a societal level of those. From there, what I like to see happen is this uptake of existing lung cancer screening, breast, prostate, cervical, colorectal. These are technologies that exist that save lives already today. So if that uptake can happen to everybody knowing I am eligible for it and I'm going for it and I'm reimbursed for it and my co-pays don't become a burden for it, like that's great. And incentives for physicians to talk about it. How many times we go to our general practitioner, our family physician, and they have very little time to not only give to us for what we have come for, but talk about other things. So creating incentives in the system is what I like to see, where a physician can sit down with you, Anna, and say, hey, what's your family background? What's your history? What are your risk factors? What you need to be doing on the preventive side? And the last I like to see is, we talked about these new technologies, paths to accelerating them and bringing them into regular use, while at the same time understanding their gaps and managing and mitigating those as we roll it out.
All right, Mohit, we are almost out of time, but before I let you go, what's the one thing you hope our audience, we've got a lot of people that are working on these issues, staffers on Capitol Hill, obviously the staffs of both the members of Congress who were on stage earlier. What's one thing you want to leave them with from our conversation this morning?
Yeah, I'll go back to where I started. Cancer today is no longer a scary word. It is screenable, detectable, and treatable, and I truly would like that to be the headline out there in everybody's head, that we can fight this disease together, and all of us play a role, from Congress to a church pastor to every individual in every household. So please, we got to understand and do better in understanding the risk factors and acting on that. And I wish every one of us uses the opportunity of this Breast Cancer Awareness Month to educate those who may be eligible for screening.
Take the time to have the conversation.
Perfect.
I like it. All right. Mohit, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you.
All right, and thanks to all of you for joining us, to AstraZeneca for making conversations like this possible, as well as to Congressman Griffith and Congresswoman DeGette for joining us. Have a great day and stay safe, everybody.